Well, by my counting, it's 9 o'clock, so we'll get a start there. There may be some stragglers, but bless you all for being here so early in the morning and to be part of the program this morning. My name is Kent Burtner. I used to be a Catholic priest back, I was ordained in 1994 and was trained in pastoral counseling. And as a priest, got a reputation for helping people who used to be involved in cults and thought reform programs, one kind or another. I left the priesthood in 1994. No, when was I ordained? 76. Now I left in 94 and was married, and I thought the cult stuff would sort of peter out, but it kept coming. I mean, people had heard my name, and so they kept chasing after me. I was on the board of directors of the Cult Awareness Network in the days when that was thriving, and continued working with former cult members. And so I've been privileged, and I mean this seriously, to have worked with people that have been through the cult experience. They've taught me an awful lot. And after 45 years of this, I picked up a little bit of background, and folks have been very generous sharing their stories and helping me understand the issue. So I get to turn around and help other people now, and it's really quite a good exchange. Since you deserved to come early, you deserve a good story. So I'll tell you a good story. There was a little old lady in New York City. She gets on the phone and she calls the travel agent. And she says to the travel agent, I wish I could do a good New York accent, but she says to the travel agent, I want to go to India to see the guru. The travel agent's a little nonplussed by this, but he says, all right, well, we'll make arrangements for you. And before long, she's on a plane flying to India to see the guru. And she lands and gets in a taxi, and she goes to the ashram where the guru is, and she comes upon a building with lots of arches, and between the arches, pictures of different Hindu deities, and very large double door at the front door. So she goes up to the front door and knocks on the door. And after a while, a beturbaned tall gentleman opens the door and asks her what she wants. And she says, I'm come to see the guru. He says, madam, nobody sees the guru. But I've come all the way from New York. I've got to see the guru. Well, just a moment. He closes the door. And after an interminable long time, he comes back and opens the door and says, the guru will see you. But you may only say 5 words to him. And she says, 5 words is enough. So she walks down this long hallway past several ante-rooms where people are doing yoga or meditating or chanting. And she gets to the end of the hallway in another set of double doors, and the beturbaned man opens the door and says, remember, only 5 words. So he opens the door for her, and she sees a big ballroom-sized room with marble floors and windows on the side with silken tapestries blowing in the gentle wind that's blowing in. And at the end of the room, seated on a dais, in lotus position, is the guru. So slowly she walks up to the guru, and the guru opens his eyes and looks down at her and smiles benignly. And she says to him, Sheldon, come home already. So anyway, my plan is I've got a paper here, and there are copies up in front you can take if you like, and it's also on the Wahova app. And if I were to do the paper and read through everything that is there, it would take me an hour to an hour and a half, including time for questions. So what I'm going to do is just hit a couple of hot button items and let you take the paper home and read it at your leisure and go from there. But I'm going to ask who's here. Are there any therapist type people here? Yeah, okay, we've got a few. And former members of groups, we've got a few of those too. Some of them are overlapping. Very good. Okay, great. So I wanted to tell you a schedule thing, by the way. We have until 9:30 for this presentation, and then Michelle is going to take over for the next half hour. And then from 10 to 10:30, the program that was going to be here has been canceled. So we have this room from 10 to 10:30. If you want to hang out and schmooze afterwards, you're welcome to do that. So, all right, well, launching into things, the first thing I want to say to folks that if you are in a high control group, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you were recruited to a high control group. You joined because the group offered you something positive, maybe increased self-knowledge, maybe a deeper spirituality, or maybe a chance to make the world a better place to live, or an opportunity to increase your earning potential, become a better sportsman, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because we know that you can take any topic and make a cult out of it. Often, though not always, you're at a time of transition in your life. But what's universal is that the group and its leadership used a coordinated program of psychological and social influence control techniques to gain your allegiance and to maintain your affiliation with the group. And for a time and a season, it was impossible for you to leave. Something may have happened that you did get a chance to leave, but learning about these social control mechanisms will, in fact, help your healing in a profound way, if you haven't done that already. I want to say, for those of you who have left groups, congratulations on freeing yourself. I think that's really great. Second thing I want to say is that most of the challenges that present themselves on the road to recovery are the results of normal responses that you have made to extraordinarily abnormal situations. And third, as we review these things, you will discover that for the most part, you are not crazy and that you haven't lost your sanity. Most people learn to cope with these issues, and I won't attempt to list all of the issues that come down, but I've got about 24 of them, 25 of them or so, and I'll deal with a couple of those. And now most of my work has been with first-generation escapees, but I have worked with second-generation, multi-generation people and find that these points oftentimes help them as well. You just have to kind of reinterpret that. And for you therapeutic types, I've written this paper aimed at the former member. So you can do your therapeutic translation into therapy-ese and all of that will be fine. But an urgent thing to therapist folks is to be mindful that when you see these things in your client, don't just assume that it might have been some pathological thing going on in the person's life before they joined the cult. Look to these things as the result of a thought reform program. And then if there's other family or family of origin issues, get to those. But to look at these things first as the possibility that they're the result of a thought reform program. So in terms of recovering, I think of things in terms of two categories: things that you have to do internally and things that you have to do externally in dealing with the real world outside. And the first of these things it just says depression? Oh, it says can't. Oh, all right, I'm sorry. Okay. Now does it say depression? What does it say?
Is it on and are you pointing it at? Pointed at the back. There we go.
Okay, there we go. Okay, thank you. Depression and loss. When you leave a group, the first thing that you've lost is a community. It may have been a community based on something that wasn't particularly healthy or particularly good in the long run, but you've lost a community of friends, of family. When someone joins a high control group, they systematically wind up replacing their friendship groups, their family affiliations. They wind up replacing their spirituality, and they might even wind up replacing their vocation. And then you step out of a group and you've got all of that to deal with. I mean, that's an enormous, enormous challenge. And being depressed is probably the most common experience that people that I've worked with, is that's the first thing that hits you. Is you'd think, oh boy, I'm free. And that might last for a minute or two, but then the other stuff hits you and there you are. Your family may have cut ties with you because they saw you as a deployable agent of a group's leadership that they didn't approve of. So reestablishing ties and normalizing those relationships takes time and effort. And then there's the issue of lost years. I mean, how many years you've put into this group, and you've lost sync with your peers in terms of your growth and development and your career pattern. You're out of sync there. There's a loss of innocence from having gone to a place where you're going to save the world, and now you're dealing with just the workaday issues of daily life, things that were taken care of for you maybe in your group. You may have feeling that you've enriched your group and its leader at your expense and spread ideas that to your old self and to your present day self you don't approve of. You may have found that you adopted a pseudo-cult identity. Your real self was buried deeply within the pressures to conform to the group. The pressures are really strong, and if you have thoughts and feelings that don't match what the group says is okay, your natural, normal thing to do is to suppress them. Put them underground, pave them over, keep them so that they don't bother you anymore, which is really hard because in a high control group, your real self is stuck under there. And then you have to adapt the thoughts and feelings that the group wants you to have as if they were your own. As your real self emerges, it may seem really overwhelming to recover that self of yours. And you've gone from a 24-hour-a-day schedule of work, ritual, and community to the regular issues of common everyday living. And if that wasn't enough, everybody has unfinished business in terms of normal growth and development. And those things, generally speaking, have to get put on hold. In fact, to deal with them may seem selfish in the context of the group, because why spend all of that time on you when you got the world to save right here and right now? So a former member who joined at 30, at 18, and then left at 30 may find themselves emotionally back where they were at 18 or 19 before they could move ahead. And that's a really big thing. So just one of those catches. Guilt? Yeah. Good. Okay. So guilt and shame, another big thing. To start with, quick definitions. We feel guilty when we have wronged somebody, but we feel shame when we view ourselves as bad. So cultic groups are skilled at inducing and manipulating both of those feelings. Guilt is a powerful tool for social control. If I can make you feel guilty, you're going to have to come back to me to feel unguilty. And I'll tell you how to do it. And how you do it is to put you into an endless cycle of guilt and shame, and then forgiveness and restoration, and then treating you kindly, and then restarting the process all over again, so that you're caught in this endless loop of feeling guilty. You never really get ahead. You're behind the 8 ball all the time. I remember a young loony telling me years ago that his goal for one day for selling flowers was to sell $40 worth of flowers. And he went out and sold $35 worth of flowers. But his supervisor, his center figure, told him that what he really had to do now was to make up for it by selling $60 worth of flowers the next day. So he sold $50 worth of flowers the next day. And guess what? That wasn't enough. So he's got to do 70. So, I mean, you're forever behind the 8 ball in these things. And it's important to distinguish between the kind of guilt that the group wants to instill in you and the guilt that you might feel after the fact. For instance, you may have manipulated other people in the process and knowingly done so, but it was for God's purpose. It was a higher purpose, so it was okay in some way. You may have had uncertain feelings, but you did what the group wanted to. Your own moral compass may have been at odds with what you were doing, but you wound up doing it anyway. Or your own moral compass may have been so buried beneath the thought reform program that you had no idea what was right and what was wrong, and you just depended on the group to tell you what was right and wrong. But the point is that to the degree that you were under psychological duress, you were not responsible for those behaviors. You may have done things you don't look at now and say, great, that was wonderful, but you were not responsible for those kinds of behaviors. Now, shame is the result of a message saying that what you are is not good enough, that you're unworthy, that your very being is bad, that you don't deserve the air that you breathe. And the application of shame by the group leadership system is an all-out assault on your sense of well-being. And as we know, if you can diminish a person's sense of well-being, their ego strength, to that degree, they become much more manipulable. So the recovery challenge then is to recognize that any residual shame you may feel as a result of this assault is not warranted. In other words, if you're feeling shame about yourself after the fact of being in a group, you need to say, hey, wait a minute, this is not for real. And one of the fundamental assumptions of most religious traditions and democracies is that you as a human being are worthy to start with. Your being is a good thing. You can get that from Aristotle, you can get that from most religious traditions. Even our American democracy says you are worthy of being. And groups like these don't want you to have that feeling. You might consider, for example, a way to recover that is to look back at the time in your group, and there were some things you did that were good, that you feel good about, and write those down. Make a note of that. You were doing something good in the midst of all the craziness. And then you might take a look at the gifts and skills that you have as a human being right now and say, are these really things that I need to be ashamed of? And chances are you're going to say, no, this is not so good. This is where a good therapist might come in to help you too, or a good friend or a family member if you have somebody outside the group that you can relate to, and help you reestablish your sense of well-being and the fact that you deserve things. As a pastoral counselor, I jump into a lot of things, but in the Old Testament, in Genesis 1:31, says God looked at everything and he saw it was very good. So there's a lot of ways to get at that insight and to hold on to it. When you're leaving your group, you may continue to experience feelings of guilt about things that were bad in the group. You may think about those things and remember that the group told you they were bad. You may have a sexual feeling. You may have even feeling hungry or tired or thirsty might be a bad feeling in that group's ideology. But go back to that and look at those messages and say, who do they serve? Who's benefiting from my feeling guilty? Chances are nobody except the group. And you can pass that sense of control beyond you. So then I want to talk about another one in the same line as feeling shameful about doubt. And doubt in so many religious groups especially is a sign that Satan is attacking you, something awful is going on. But look at it this way, turn this around. Doubt may in fact be an opportunity for something virtuous. I quote St. Thomas Aquinas, who says that doubt is really a good thing because it gives you a chance to reflect on what you really think and what you really believe and what you really want to own. And then that turns into a place of virtue because you get to make a free choice about something. So an example would be a young woman who was taught in her group that the group's leader had an exalted place in the economy of salvation, and that if she lost her faith in the leader, she would lose her spirituality. Well, she started to doubt that. And she realized that even though she wasn't very happy with her group's leader, she was happy with her relationship with God, with her spirituality. And the doubt gave her the opportunity to say, I don't need this leader. I get to keep my spirituality. And guess what? She left the group. So that's kind of the short version. So let me take a quick look at my time here because we've only got so much time. Yes, I'm 2 minutes ahead of myself. But what I wanted to do was to invite discussion from you about any of these topics or some of the other things that 24 other issues on the list that I've got here.